Jimmy, do you know what I have avoided most of my life? More than
Everclear?
anything else? No.
You should.
Failure. When I look at my life, I think more than anything else, I have sought to avoid failure. And that has
How's that gone for you?
terribly.
Oh, it's going to be a great episode.
Terribly wrong. It is not happened. I have failed, but it's very scary to fail. It's scary to find yourself in a position where, whether it's relational, whether it's in your work, whether it's with your kids, or whatever, to have an experience of failure. We tend to want to avoid it at all costs. And today, one of the things we're talking about is how failure can actually be a great gift from God.
Yes.
To bring about so many good things.
And we're having this conversation with one of my favorite people. I have known this man for 15 years? It's been crazy. His name is Brian McCormack, and if you haven't heard of him, there's something
Who
wrong
even
with
are you?
Yeah, that's right. Brian is a buddy that I've known for a while, and he is now currently, as of just a handful of months ago, really, he's been installed as the executive director of Breakaway Ministries in College Station, Texas, at Texas A&M University. It's basically the largest on-campus Bible study in the nation. I mean, sometimes it's 9,000 students showing up, and it's amazing. And so many great guys have led this in the past, mentors of mine, and now Brian is stepping into that role. He's had this incredible journey of ministry up and down and all over the map. And now he's wound up here, and we just wanted to sit down with him because we're going, your journey's been fascinating. You're in this position of leadership now. We're talking about purpose and meaning. I'm sure you've got much to say about that from your own life, and you're speaking constantly to the 20-something crowd and all that. What might you have to say about it? And it was awesome. So I'm excited to share the combo with you.
Yeah. So enjoy our conversation with our friend Brian.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages from 1 to 92, I want to introduce you to our friend, Brian McCormack. I know he's hard to see here, but how many tall jokes you get a day? That's not fair. He's tall.
A few.
Actually, that's why we brought you here.
They have no sense of that.
No, they don't. They don't. Yeah. We are so glad to have our friend Brian with us. Brian, I literally don't remember how we met, but I know. Do you remember how? I know that.
Will it make him feel bad if I do remember?
Do you remember?
He's a very forgetful person.
I think the first time we met was I was preaching and you were worship at a fall retreat for Klein United Methodist Church.
Whoa.
Shout out to Klein United Methodist.
Klein.
I haven't kept that relationship up. But
wait, what year was this? Do we have any?
Dude, I couldn't even guess.
It's got to be longer than
this
13, 14. I mean,
yeah.
Are you guys both married at the time?
We were.
You had to be.
We had to be.
I think so.
But it's been a long time.
We're old enough to have no idea.
That's right. That's right.
In that decade. Yeah.
Somewhere in there.
Yeah, it was a long time ago.
Yeah, since then we both wound up with 5 kids each. And I wanted to bring you on because I called you about this, but dude, your story, when I'm thinking about the book, and I'm thinking about what Purposeful is trying to do in dealing with where we get our meaning from, and is it connected to our activities, or is it connected to the person of Jesus? And answer, it's Jesus.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, write that. You got it. And then I'm thinking about folks who have been on any number of sides of that journey of experiencing a lot of, what we've said a lot on this podcast and in the book, they've done a lot of the verbs. They've had the notoriety thing. They've lived in obscurity, all that. And when I'm thinking about folks who've been on any parts of that journey, I thought about you because you've been kind of all over the map in that when I think about you. So sure. Maybe give us the 5-minute of I'm starting the ministry, and how did you wind up at Breakaway and all that whole journey?
Yeah. All of that for sure. So I grew up in a church context, grew up in a Catholic context. There
I
are
forgot
some
about
Catholics
that.
that
That's
like
right.
know and love Jesus passionately.
Yeah.
I was not one of them.
Yeah.
I had a very moralistic and kind of fear-based understanding of God. I was 16 when I met Jesus at kind of the mega church down the street at a youth event facilitated by some Aggies, actually, and some Breakaway.
Gig them.
Go gig them.
Yes.
And so, but anyway, that is kind of was a turning point for me.
Yeah.
Obviously, the gospel kind of moving into clarity and color, something really tangible. And really early on, I felt this compulsion. Like I didn't have language to describe what was happening theologically or even emotionally in me. It was super hard trying to articulate that to my incredibly faithful Catholic parents who did everything right.
Yeah.
But early on, I couldn't shake this feeling like that that God had a plan for me. Like, and I was terrified of arrogance even then, largely from my scared of God, better be good Catholic stuff. And so saying like, I just feel like God has a weird plan for me. And I would say like something big, but I don't know what that means. And it wasn't like the fact that all of us, like our kind of collective generation was you can do anything, you're a snowflake, like all that kind of stuff. My parents weren't that. Like they believed in me, but it wasn't like you can change the world and all that. So it felt real. It felt spiritual. Like God has this peculiar plan for me. I don't know what it's going to be. And I felt drawn to ministry type stuff. And as I learned to study scripture, it would look like sermon notes and I would move on once I could explain it or teach it to somebody. But anyway, fast forward, when I'm not playing college basketball, I'm doing youth ministry internships. Graduate after playing ball at a couple different schools around the country that took me to some of those different tribes you talked about. And ended up in youth ministry for a while and felt called to plant a church. And that kind of started this trend. Like I can keep the narrative and honor kind of what we're talking about today. This trend of me being scared enough of arrogance to not desire like the platform. I wasn't like the 22-year-old, like I should be preaching at Passion. Not this Louis clown, right? Like I wasn't that guy.
With his white shoes.
Right. Who's this guy? I wasn't arrogant. Like I wasn't that audacious. But I developed this habit of always wanted to be right next to the person. Maybe to get associated with them a little bit. There was room for that much arrogance. But this desire of like being on the shoulder or on the hip of that leader would give me kind of the anointing that I know decades later only comes from being on the hip of Jesus, right?
That's right.
So that kind of went just vocation to vocation, not vocation, location to location. That tendency kind of followed me around. And so ended up in California with, in a context, just getting to learn in a college context from one of like the larger voices in kind of like conservative Baptist world. And then ended up in Seattle under another just like mega voice who was like kind of culturally just wildly influential at the time. And when those things kind of revealed themselves to be less than perfect, even kind of went to I didn't learn my lesson fast enough, like went to another like kind of subgroup, less flashy, but still had like that leader leading that movement and was like, that's the one I need to have in my living room. And I need to be learning their way to do discipleship. And it took the better part of my 30s, man, to shake off. I need to be always adjacent to the anointed leader. Instead of like, just the simplicity of like, nah, just if you apprentice to Jesus, things are probably going to work out pretty well. So that's kind of we can jump anywhere you want from that.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
What do you think is the fear that was behind that? Like, I need to be close to this leader.
Like what drove it? Like
what
is that?
And then did you have seasons where you weren't around a key leader of some kind?
Yeah.
And did you feel any of those fears creeping in, whatever they were?
For sure.
At least I find for me when there's a drive towards something that's not healthy necessarily, it's usually there's a desire, but behind the desire is fear.
Yeah.
If I don't get that, then this.
Totally.
Did you experience that?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Like what was behind that fear or that desire to always be right there? The voice in my head was, you're not qualified. You're not qualified. Like, and I think part of it was although my parents like demonstrated Christ-like service and commitment and conviction, like they did everything right, I still felt other compared to all the others, like with some kind of kingdom or gospel ambition when it came to Christian leadership. I still felt like I'm 16 years behind everybody else. And like I'm having to play catch up. I didn't go to Bible school. I'm a business major. I'm having to catch up educationally. I don't have practical leadership experience. I'm just clawing all the time. Like, is it enough? Is it enough? Is it enough? So ironically, I was someone who just delighted in the gospel of grace. But the voice in my head was still like, you're not enough. They have it figured out.
Yeah.
That perpetual, there's always that person who just looks like they're killing it. And they probably have followers and they probably have a book deal.
That's right.
You know, like,
yeah, sure.
And it's not even like, I want that, so I'm going to get close. It's like, no, that's all great. And I'll take it if that comes with it. But I just want the confidence and the assurance that you appear to have.
Yeah.
And it took a lot of swings and misses to be like, oh, you're wildly insecure.
Yeah.
Like you're a mess. Yeah. Like, but like you're a gifted mess that God is using beautifully. And instead of like kind of taking that on myself, like I can be a beautiful mess that God uses.
Absolutely.
I had to run that lap around the track a couple times.
Was there an event or like a series of events? It's like, okay, I'm being exposed now. I can see what I couldn't see before. But it took this encounter, this. I was curious, like, how do you get from that to.
What got you out of the loop?
Yeah, for sure. Failure?
Yeah.
Failure is a heck of an antidote.
Yeah.
For the wrong kind of ambition.
Yeah.
You should say that again.
It's a failure. Failure is a very potent antidote for like the virus or the tendency of like performance-based
identity stuff.
All that.
I love that so much.
And I think that is what ultimately, we ended up planting a church in Seattle that became like this beautiful, vibrant, healthy, multiplying thing that was born in our living room. But the thing that preceded the most fruitful season of our ministry to date, over 17 years, was just like the crash and burn, tap out, I'm not capable, I can't do this kind of failure.
Yeah.
Like that was literally immediately before we planted. And as someone who, I've never been a hyper achiever, but like always did pretty well academically, got to do college athletics, got to, succeed in some worldly measures to some degree, but had never just fallen flat on my face before. And having to kind of tap out of the job immediately preceding our church plant era and just say, if this is the gig, I can't do it. Like I'm not capable. Like a pastor who was close to me at that time that I was confiding in as that slow motion train wreck was happening, his advice when I was just shaky one Sunday when he saw me at that church was, Brian, I could see you wanting to pull out right now and go back to like being the youth speaker guy. I don't think you should do that. I think it'll kill your soul. And he just looks at me. He's like, I think you need to crash on the rocks and just actually experience the truth that Jesus is enough.
Yeah.
And in the moment, I was like, this is the worst advice I've ever heard in my life.
Did you just tell me to die?
Is this like prescribing?
I think he said die.
But sure enough, man, like that,
Yeah.
we felt like I did it. Like I went through the season and I took it all the way as far as I could and crashed on the rocks metaphorically. But I let the hollowness of performance-based ambition run its entire course and like kind of just wash up on the beach. And then it was, then quit and then dealt with like the embarrassment of that for like a couple of days, couple of weeks. And then it was just kind of like you're in the firefight and you're like, am I okay?
Yeah.
I got shot up, but I'm okay.
Yeah.
Like, and suddenly like the moral becomes like the fear of failure is really bad.
Yeah.
Failure itself just isn't that bad if the gospel's true.
That's good.
And like that was definitely the pivotal thing for me. I mean, there were more lessons to learn along the way.
Yeah.
In that ongoing lesson of just where is my purpose? Where does it come from? Oh, but that was absolutely the hinge. And like there's times now when I'm with younger leaders, whether it's I'm kind of screening or interviewing potential church planters, or right now we're interviewing for roles at Breakaway. Just one of my questions is always like, have you have you failed at anything yet?
Mm.
And they
Love
think
that.
they're being like, they think it's a performance-based
Oh, no,
thing.
never,
Right.
sir. Yeah.
No, I would never do that.
I would never.
I certainly wouldn't fail you. And I'll change, like, no. Has God, like, loved and graced you enough to let
Amen.
you fail yet
Yeah.
at something meaningful?
Amen. Yes.
And that's always like, wait, what? So,
I love
Yeah.
that. You're like speaking my language, because this has been, and people that have heard other episodes in this season have heard my side of things, that I'm married to somebody who's been wildly ambitious for big things.
mhm.
My ambition has never been that. It's been similar to yours. I just don't want to fail.
Hmm.
Doesn't that is the glory I'm seeking.
Yeah.
And God has gifted me failure to the point where I began to pray in terror a little bit.
Mhm.
If I see you best in failure, God, then let me fail,
Yeah.
that I might see you.
Hmm.
Because I started to see there was glory in failure.
Yeah.
Because it stripped me of finding meaning anywhere other than Him,
Yeah.
especially when you're driven by success, of however you define it. We all define success differently, and you're describing a unique type of success
Yeah.
that God let you fail at. He gifted you with failure that you
Mhm.
might see Him. And I think that that's one of the reasons I wrote this book, one of the reasons it has the tagline, why chasing our dreams and finding our calling, all these things, reaching greatness will never be enough. And people have said to me, that seems like a really depressing title. I'm like, maybe so. I'm hoping it'll be intriguing and you'll turn the cover, turn
Yeah.
around
Yeah.
and read the back a little bit.
It's
But
just 200 pages if you just
Yeah,
pop in
yes.
kids' balloons. Just like, yeah, just like,
I know.
no, it's not that at all.
It does feel that way.
No, it's
But
wonderful.
because at the end, even if you got all the things, it's not
Mhm.
enough.
Yeah.
And when God gives you a failure before you reach that mountaintop, it's actually a gift. And so throughout Purposefooled is a lot of Ecclesiastes, actually,
Mhm.
because Ecclesiastes is Solomon climbing the mountain and saying, I did it all. I did it all without failure.
Yeah.
I accomplished everything.
Yeah.
There's nothing here.
Mhm.
Sounds about right.
God is where meaning is found.
Mhm.
And He's at the bottom of the mountain and at the top. But
Yeah.
the top of the mountain has nothing more to offer you than the bottom.
Less
And so-
air, often.
Less air.
Yeah.
True. So when you fail and you roll from that top of that achievement mountain down to the bottom, you find out, oh, the
Mhm.
thing that I'm made for is here as well.
Yeah.
It's so liberating. It actually allows you to take more risks because you can fail now and not have fear of that. I now can actually be more strategic, more creative, more ambitious in helpful, holy
Yeah.
ways because I'm not so tied to, I can't fail at this thing.
Right.
It's like, I may fail at it. I think it's a good idea. I'm going to try it. And if I stumble and fail, I still got the
Mhm.
Lord.
Yeah.
It actually infuses our work with, I think, more long-lasting passion and drive in
Mhm.
healthy ways than when we are performance-driven.
100%. And you just nailed it. You absolutely nailed it when it came to the way things shift post-failure
Mhm.
and how that adjusts everything. Specifically for us, like we were going into church planting in Seattle, Washington.
Yes.
Like I'm trying to think of a funny analogy.
Yeah,
of
that
like
is the
a less
analogy.
likely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. But it's like a less
That's what
likely
you say when you're
thing.
trying to say something like
Yeah,
that.
well, it's not church planting in
Yeah.
Seattle.
Right.
But no, statistically, a
Mhm.
really low likelihood
Mhm.
of any measure of success.
Yeah.
The righteous kind,
Yeah.
the worldly
Yeah.
kind, any of those
It
are
ain't gonna
unlikely.
happen. Yeah.
Right. We went into that
Mhm.
with a very sincere, like not tongue in cheek. We felt bulletproof. Not like
Mhm.
we knew it was going to succeed, but we felt bulletproof. Like, well, the worst case scenario is like, this doesn't work. We fail again. We just did that and it just wasn't that bad.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And the thing that we became so convinced of, and this is what guides our decisions so much more now, and I think
Mm.
ties into really the epicenter of the book and our conversation, is we became convinced that of the different options we had on the table before we planted the church, the thing that pushed us across the finish line of like, we're all in on this was, this is the option in the scenario that we believe gives us the most Jesus.
Yeah.
Mm.
Like this is the scenario that's going to show us a different side of him, that's going to teach us deeper dependence on him.
Mhm.
And that is our decision-making mechanism. And that's something
Amen.
we've taken with us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is like so not that is the gospel.
Mhm.
And it is so not how our culture is pitching how to succeed in life, or how, even in Christendom. I don't want to paint with a broad brush because there's so many healthy expressions of this, but like I do feel like in the wider Western Christian world, somehow we just can't get away from like tying our doing to this whole thing, and we forget that it really does just come down to proximity to Jesus. Because he's the only. If you tie your worth to performance, then you have to perform.
That's right.
And we're just. I mean, I'm just bad at it. I'm not. There's so many unknowns there. Will I do a good job? Will the circumstances around me afford me the ability to even if I did it right? Will the doors open? And it's like, man. But I'm saddened when I think about the messaging to, especially the younger generation about this, and the volume being turned up on social media even about this, because I do feel like what is being pumped out there is, in the name of Jesus, go climb that mountain. And you're in a college town. Yeah. All you do all day now is minister to 18 to 22-year-olds. Are you seeing that? Is that a fair way to talk about how this generation is being pitched, where their meaning comes from?
Right.
And if so, how do we help them rethink that? Yeah.
What effects are you seeing of that?
Yeah, for sure. I think that I'm seeing two things. I see spectacular amounts of hunger.
Yeah.
That is not a throwaway introduction. That's my update from the frontier or whatever. Is that what is happening among college students, at least at Texas A&M. And I think that what happened at Asbury and what spread to other parts of the country among this demographic with Gen Z, people will call me because we didn't plan it this way. We got commissioned as the new leaders of Breakaway single-digit days after the Asbury outpouring started.
Yeah.
And we're just like, okay, Lord, what are you doing? Yeah. So I start getting the phone calls what are you seeing? What's going on? Is it revival or not? It's a whole nother episode. But that was the first thing I said. I tell you what I do see. Call it what you want. I see hunger, unusual hunger. So that's on one side of the tension. Hunger for the things of God. Hunger for a life that matters in Christ. Hunger for making a legitimate impact on the world. And I know that we want to have this conversation in such a way that still encourages people
yes, that's right.
to have that impact. But that over here, hunger for all those things. And then total panic and paralysis of knowing what to do with one's life and what step to take in what direction.
Yeah.
And that's the tension. How do these things work together?
Yeah.
And I think that there is a spiritual, theological thing that makes this book so important. That makes it so important about just where your purpose is found and the kind of the biblical theology, that narrative thread, Genesis to Revelation, of where a person's purpose is found. They need that foundation all the time, on repeat.
Yes.
And on top of the practicality of okay, so different things about my purpose. It's in Jesus. It will sometimes be revealed to me all at once. It will sometimes be revealed over decades. Some of it is identical to every other believer in the world. Some of it is kind of customized for me.
Yeah.
And sometimes my first step out of college is going to look like a job got me there. And I'm probably going to fall completely on my face because it had nothing to do with my job.
Yeah.
In the eyes of God. And I need to be playing the long game with him.
Yeah.
So that tension of the theological, the practical, I'm so hungry for Jesus and a life lived for him. But man, I'm terrified because I feel like I'm supposed to have it figured out the moment I declare a major when I'm 19 years old.
Right.
And if I don't have it nailed, then I'm behind.
Yeah.
And I can relate to that. That comes straight back to me, that I'm behind. I got to catch up. I got to grind. And there's so many sad side effects of aimless scramble. So you don't have direction, but you know you're behind. So you're in a race.
Right.
You are
not sure what the race is
somewhere.
Yeah.
And running into that wall and running into that wall. And I think that as as much as I believe my life has been fruitful, that my wife and I have lived a fruitful life for the last 15 years, in some ways, that spirit robbed me of like true awareness and presence of what God was doing in the moment.
Yeah.
And the true beauty of like the size and scope in terms of like kingdom measurables of what he was doing through us.
Yeah.
Right.
Because it was always like, yeah, but we should be doing more, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm still playing catch up. So then I look now and I'm 40 instead of 30. And it's like, we planted a beautiful church that planted beautiful churches and got to invest in this and that and got to like be a voice at this event or that event, like just got to do meaningful things in the measure of the kingdom. And like got, my wife and I, like we care about education. So like did the master's thing. I got my doctorate, all this like, and still just crawling and scratching and still asking like, if I'm honest, like that inner child's voice, like, is it enough?
Yeah.
If we can, to get back to your original question, if we can get back to the place where there's clarity of purpose and like a divine patience and intentionality to walk it out and play the long game with God to help them sidestep the scramble,
right?
Where they ultimately, gosh, man, I scratched for a decade and I didn't really get to even taste all the things fully that God was doing.
Yeah.
Well, and that scrambling kills any stillness and rest.
Yeah.
And I think that's really the seedbed for true vitality and fruitfulness. If you go to like John 15, where Jesus says, apart from me, you can do nothing. I find that really freeing.
Yeah.
You on your own can't do anything, by the way. But then he says, abide in me as the branch abides in the vine, and you will bear much fruit. It's a promise. Abide and fruit will come. Yeah. Jesus is after fruitful lives. Yeah. He is after our lives leaving an impact. Yeah. But the fruitfulness is sourced in him and not us, which means so long as we're near him, we can't help but be fruitful. Yeah. It will just happen.
That's good.
No matter where you go, which I find really freeing. And not that there's not a place for plans, a place that we can't say all the things right now. But as someone who's felt that tension, that scramble, what do I do next? It's been really helpful for me to look at some of the things Jesus says and be reminded, where I go, you are, Lord, because your spirit's in me. And that means as long as I stay close to you, where I go, fruit will go.
Yep.
Wow. And if that is at home, I'm doing dishes. Now, I'm a mom of 5, so that's a lot of my life is in the home space. If that is in the lobby on Sunday morning, if that is going to the dry cleaners and I interact with somebody, where I go, your spirit is. And that means fruitfulness will be there. Now, it's not always measured in the ways I would like. The nice, clean little lines of like, well, this looked like increase, It's like, I don't know. But I do know that he's after my hard work, my fruitful living for the kingdom. But he says that it's sourced in him, which frees me to then go, I can just rest sometimes. Yeah. Even in my resting, there's fruitfulness. If it's true that abiding produces fruit. Yep. And one of the things I do hope that this book gives permission for people to do, especially people caught in that I'm sprinting everywhere thing, is permission to stop and spend time knowing God. Yeah. That if life is really about a person, and that means knowing is actually more important than doing, and will actually infuse our doing with health. It will actually make us do in better, healthier, more fruitful ways than the doing we may have without the knowing. Wow. But knowing takes being still.
Yeah. Takes time.
Takes time.
Yeah. Yep.
Sitting with him. But wouldn't all of us say, man, I am able to do the ministry that God has set before me because of those hours spent in a prayer closet, right?
Yeah.
But it's so scary to set time away in a prayer closet when you feel like you're behind in the race. Everybody else is ahead of you. You've got 1,000 things to catch up on. I don't have time to pray. Yeah. It sounds really counterintuitive, but I think that's how we feel.
100%. I think it's really interesting too, just like you saying, as long as we're abiding in Jesus, John 15 style, fruit will go with us because he's going with us, or rather we're going with him.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
That's powerful. That's powerful. And it's just like Jesus saved my life. Literally, I got saved reading John 15. And so you go a couple verses forward and he starts basically prescribing this like formula for the fruit that comes from abiding. It's like you abide in me and you lay down your life for them.
Yeah.
You abide in me and you lay down your life for them. And it's like this greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for his friends. And so a lot of our pursuit of purpose, we say, is for greater fruit. And like the fruit only comes through death.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so like I have to admit, like I said, this is a timely season for me, that after seasons of intentionally, we will shepherd these people in our living room. We will shepherd these people awkwardly sitting in a semicircle in a rec center. We will shepherd these people in a high school auditorium, whatever, like whatever it's been. It would be dishonest for me to say that this is not a season of us stepping onto a 34-year-old platform, a 34-year-old ministry and community and legacy, but platform as well. And something that I feel like the Lord has been consistently putting before me is like, don't fall into the trap of thinking there's any way into greater fruitfulness that doesn't have like a greater standard of dying to yourself.
That's right.
Yeah.
That those things will continue to go up and to the right
Always.
if you want to stay healthy and have lasting fruit.
Yeah.
And I think what's so, like, to get back to why is it hard for a 22-year-old, like we were saying, is we are inundated with images and stories of people who project fruitfulness platform that costs nothing. I think that's might be the primary thing. Like you were referring to, like, just like Christian leadership that has like this Jesus sprinkles on it. Like, or I have these dreams and then I really surrender to Jesus and now he's going to bless my dreams.
That's right.
Because I can literally scroll examples of things that claim that and seem to project and demonstrate that. But yeah, like the greater the platform, the steeper the price.
Yeah.
I mean, in God's economy, that's greater joy too.
Yeah.
If you
That's
actually go through with I'm going to lay down my life.
Yeah.
I'm going to love with the greatest love there is because that's how I've been loved. And there's the epicenter of my purpose forever.
Yeah.
Which is where John 15 goes, right?
Mhm.
I say these things so your joy may be made full.
That's good.
That's it.
That he's actually after our joy, after life, after fruit. He's after all the things we're after if we would just let him lead us into these seasons of dying, pruning. And I think that's why these conversations matter so much. And I actually think they matter more and more, ironically, as social media exists, because we are seeing these shallow things without a lot of cost. But the cost is often hidden. And if we don't talk about the hidden seasons in our own walks of failure, of silence, of stillness, if people don't hear others saying that, then they don't, one, either know it's an option, that it's commendable, what it will feel like when they're there. What will it feel like when you fail? What will it feel like when you stop doing to sit and know him? It will feel hard. It will feel like you're wasting your time. It will feel not great at first. But we're all here saying, that's where it's at. That's where fruitfulness starts. It's important to pull the curtain back, I think, more and more and go, this is what's really happening behind the scenes of real fruitful, joyful ministry is these things. And you can never put that on an Instagram feed. You can't really put it on a podcast. We can just testify to it, to the hidden spaces and say, I've been there. It's worth it. Go sit with him. Let him lead you to seasons of dying and serving others. With, even though there's fear, give him the fear. And trust him with that. I think of Joseph, making it to Genesis, right? To the upper echelons of leadership in Egypt. And then because of his faithfulness to his God, his unseen God, in a place of many seen gods, he resists sexual temptation. And he ends up back in a pit where he started.
Because of his faithfulness.
Because of his faithfulness. That his great following of his God actually led him to hidden spaces. But I would say that is the very thing that we see commended in the Genesis narrative. And so God let us see his story. We're just you're testifying to your own life in that. And so are we, that those hidden spaces matter. So
let me take it all the way back and maybe we can tie a bow on it. Because early you said something like, I knew from an early age that God had a plan for me, or I was meant for something to that effect. Had big things for me. So now 40-year-old you is looking back at that sense you had. How would you say, oh, I misunderstood what the whole thing, or would you look at that and go, oh, I reinterpret that sense I had now and see it differently? How would you speak about that thing then now?
Sure. That's such a great question.
Nailed it. was hoping for one great question out of this. Got it.
I think I've never been asked that question, so I've never reflected on that way before. I think
Do you like how that's?
I love the way you asked that, by the way. Don't
Hey.
repackage that.
It was a good
Don't
question.
repackage. No, seriously, because that was.
Yeah.
I just needed a second to gather my thoughts.
Yeah.
That was.
Yeah.
That's ministering to me, honestly. I think I passionately believe in like the validity and the sweetness of that moment when I'm 16. And that thing that I would say in the quiet of my own heart, like as a brand new like follower of Jesus, like I think God has big plans for me. Like I sense that. I don't even know what to call that, but I sense that. I think that was incredibly accurate. And I think that it was just like a loving father communicating in some ways with like a newborn son in a way he could understand that was completely precise.
Yeah.
And there was nothing distorted about that.
Yeah.
The distortion happened as I had to leave the quiet place and live a couple decades of life enduring a lot of the same dynamics that we just highlighted that make things hard for 22-year-olds. Was what does big mean? And what is success? And what is calling? And how do I not disappoint my family? And how do I maximize this? And how do I not compare myself to that? Like those are the things that made the path wind.
Yeah.
I don't think I would change that at all.
Yeah.
And there's like I'm incredibly thankful that God saw fit to give even a glimpse, a simplistic glimpse of like he saved me with a verse that was, John 15:13. There's no greater love than this to lay down one's life for his friends. So like 72 hours in, I knew I was loved with the greatest love in the universe. That was the cross, that he called me friend because of that. That was not about my performance, like these gospel realizations for this works-based kid. And then on top of that, like he's already shown me how much he loves me. Like, hey, I have a big plan in light of that. Like, we're not going to leave this place. We're not going to leave the cross. But like, as we walk this out, like just wait. There was no arrogance in the excitement in my 16-year-old heart, and like, what a blessing to get to walk that out with my family and with whatever friends he's placed around me to get to serve a people or a place or a generation. Like, what a gift.
Dude, I love your posture, man. I love it feels so healthy, and just, for what it's worth, when I think about you and everything you said and your posture and that guy in this space that is so, man, there's been so many good godly men in the lane that you're running in. The loudest voices in my life is some of them, and to know that God's got you there now in a place where you don't need it for your worth. It now liberates you to go, I can actually care about the people in front of me because the main thing is settled for me. I don't want something from you. I want something for you. Like that feels so great to me. I'm so happy you're in that space, man. And so happy that you join us today. Man. This is amazing.
No,
amazing.
What an honor.
And happy too that in coming back to that question of what does that God has big things for me mean, that you would still say, no, I stand by that. Because I think at the end of the day too, with this book, I hope people will feel validated in those longings. That I think the longing for greatness, the longing to be seen, to make an impact, to have something unique to do, I really do think they're God-given good longings that we sometimes just try to fulfill in wrong ways. But I think God intends to meet us in those longings. I think they're actually good ones. And so for anybody listening too that's hearing that going, I feel that. That is not a bad thing. It's a good longing. It can be, we can misinterpret God's definition of big and God's definition of great.
For sure.
But he means that. And he does have greatness for his people. The disciples ask about it. He doesn't despise them for that question. He gives them a clear, honest answer. He just redirects them like he has to with us.
Totally.
And people need stories to hear. And so thank you for sharing your story with that.
Absolutely.
To just even be an example for others to follow as they're wrestling with their own longings,
for sure.
failures. You've given us freedom to fail.
Yeah.
And freedom to keep walking with Jesus after that. bulletproof.
For sure.
I love
man.
that.
And I hope that if I can do a final word here, if that's
Do
okay.
it. Please
Final
close
word.
us
Can we
out.
put like a final word?
I close with this.
All right.
I identified, you asked a great question, and I identified that the starting point of getting purpose back in its proper place
Yeah.
was failure for me.
Yeah.
And then walking that out in like close proximity to Jesus and identity in being known by him and knowing him deeper. And even ministry, not even primarily being about doing the stuff for other people anymore. Ministry is the avenue that I get more of Jesus.
Yes.
That was another big step.
Yeah, that's
Yes.
huge.
And then just like getting over the fear of arrogance. I realized I wasn't scared of being arrogant. I was more scared of people thinking I was arrogant
Yep.
for having big ambitions.
Yeah.
And so last story that kind of encapsulates that
Yeah.
decade of transformation for me. This just happened as I was finishing up my doctorate. A professor of mine in my last year of formal school, I hope, we were talking through this issue of ambition. And, obviously a very, a sister or a cousin to the topic of
Yeah.
purpose.
Yeah.
I was really wrestling in the spiritual formation part of the program with what do I do with these gigantic ambitions, like this desire to make as big of a splash as possible for the kingdom, not because I'm great or because he wants to do big things for me. I want to pour out my life and believe that
Yes.
God wants to move in ways perhaps he hasn't moved before. Like I want to live that way. What do I do with that? But I can't be that guy because I used to be under this leader and it completely blew up, or I used to be under that leader and it hurt people. And my professor put a hand on each of my shoulders and looked me in the eye and said, Brian, if young leaders, if young followers of Jesus like you who are gifted and sincere and passionate are not dreaming big dreams and praying big prayers and setting big goals, what am I even doing here? This is like an 81-year-old man who's been at his post for 45 years. Like, what is the point if you're not still going to do that? And I think that's my final thrust is in light of the last 25, 30 minutes of like your purpose is in Jesus, your purpose is in knowing him.
Yeah.
Selling out to that doesn't mean settling for something.
That's right.
That's right.
It like is wildly liberating and empowering
It opens the
to
doors
go
to do that.
to go
Yeah.
do this, to chase that stuff.
Yes.
Like knowing where your identity and where your heart's at.
Yes.
So
100%.
that's what I got.
Amen.
Yeah. Love it. Well, hope you enjoyed the episode, guys. I told you he was awesome. He's great. And we just want to remind you, these episodes are coming out once a week.
Yep.
For the next handful of weeks, a little bit longer, a little bit deeper dives, interviews, and it's going to be super cool and helpful. So I'm stoked about it.
Be sure that you go to purposefooled.com to find out more about the book and to also pre-order it at various retailers. And then you can also go to purposefooled.com to claim all your pre-order bonuses. Start reading the book right away. So love for you to do that and join us next week.
Next week. Bye.